welcome to Think, and today I want to tell you about the book I've read recently. I'm gonna share my true thoughts and opinions about it. The book was called The Discourses of Epictetus, and it was written by his disciple Darin. Epictetus was a Stoic philosopher who taught his doctrines at Nicopolis in the 1st century Greece. He was a slave, so Epictetus is not his name, but a Greek word which means gained. As you may have already guessed, he had managed to acquire freedom, after which he gave lessons in Stoicism. The reason Arian took notes of their conversation is that Epictetus never wrote anything, but talked to his pupils. I want to say it right away that I'm not a student studying philosophy at university, let alone a philosopher, so I might have gotten something wrong. I'm just a passionate reader who's interested in the works of philosophers. Also, I think it's obvious that English is not my native language, which doubles the likelihood of me misunderstanding certain nuances. On top of that, the translations I have was made by George Long in 1904, which means there is plenty of old-fashioned words and sentence structures in this version. There is even thou instead of you, and some phrases in Latin. To be precise, not only in Latin. Apparently the writer assumes everyone knows many languages. He also includes Greek verses and words. I will show you and read you a couple of examples. Thou sufferest this justly, for thou choosest rather to become good tomorrow than to be good today. It's German. Here it's Latin. Perhaps it should be thou art doing violence to thyself. Even before reading this book, I knew that Christianity has its roots in philosophy, but the translator's explanatory passages got me thinking about it again, on a deeper level. Since George Long lived at the beginning of the 20th century, he frequently compared philosophy and religion, making clear that they share significant parallels, which is indeed the case. Most of his explanations rely on writers like John Schweinhauser, John Upton, Hieronymus Wolff, and Elizabeth Carter, whose emphasis is on the similarities between religion and Stoicism. Carter, Schweinhauser, and Upton lived in the 19th century, whereas Wolff was a prominent scholar and a German humanist who produced a foundational Latin translation of Epictetus's Discourses in 1516. The author basically provides various interpretations of the text by incorporating references from the scholars mentioned above. Sometimes he sympathizes with them and sometimes not, but more than once he rebukes Carter's arguments. I don't know whether it's because Carter is so defensive of religious dogma or because women weren't welcome in the literary world back then, or maybe Carter actually was mistaken, but the author's attacks on her really stood out to me. Let me read some sentences as an example. Mrs. Carter has not understood Epictetus, and her censure is misplaced. It is true that the most ignorant persons often practice what they know to be evil, as she truly says, but she might have said more. It does not mean that it appeared right, as Mrs. Carter translates it. Let's get back to what we were discussing. Philosophy's profound influence on religion is evident throughout the book. The author claims that the writers of the epistles in the New Testament drew forms of expression from the Stoic philosophers who wrote before Epictetus, and that they applied them to the new religion which they were teaching. So the writer often juxtaposes the teachings of Epictetus with those of Matthew and John, the apostolic authors of the New Testament. Along with religious figures, the book includes philosophers like Plato and Socrates. It was really fascinating to read the opinions of people who lived many centuries ago. The main point they stress is that God is the highest good. In contrast, Epictetus often equates God with nature, or logos, rather than a Christian view of the Creator. In fact, Christianity was already in existence during the period in which Epictetus taught. Quote, but Epictetus, though he certainly knew something of the Christian faith, and though his manual was a favorite book of some of the early Christians, remains a Stoic. Unquote. Instead of the Christian God, the Stoics believed in Zeus, who was identified with nature and all that surrounds us. If you read them, you will certainly encounter the phrase according to nature. Nature with a capital N. To be specific, they advise us to live according to nature. If I understand them correctly, it means to be content with everything allotted to you, to be free from anger, jealousy, and grief, to cultivate one's character, and to cooperate with others for the common good. Epictetus likes to repeat that humans are social animals. To isolate yourself from others is like cutting a branch of a fig tree. Importantly, he draws a clear line between humans and animals based on the human capacity for reason. Animals fulfill their natural purpose unlike humans who will never attain their proper end, because humanity, or at least the majority of it, is always a work in progress. Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor and also a Stoic, uses another metaphor. Quote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." Unquote. According to the Roman Stoics, virtue is the only thing that can be described with an adjective good. Everything else is indifferent. They call fame, pleasure, and wealth as preferred indifference, and poverty and health problems as dispreferred indifference. Epictetus gives an example of an imprisoned man a couple of times. He states that one can be free even in chains, yet a free man might restrain himself, making judgments about a certain situation. That is to say, only our own opinions can disturb us. Quote, "It is not possible that what is by nature free can be disturbed by anything else or hindered by any other thing than by itself." Unquote. Going back to what I was saying, in this book and in Stoicism generally, there is a kind of perfectly virtuous person called a sage. The sage is someone who does what is right, simply because it is right, not for the sake of wealth, reputation, or health. There are no such things as punishment or reward. The sage acts just because he must. However, someone who wants to be praised for being virtuous is only a pretender, not a virtuous person. The sage doesn't make a sacrifice when abandoning all things for virtue, for virtue is his only good. I think taking right actions throughout my lifetime makes sense because human life is short and there isn't much time to do something great. Few people achieve that in their lifetime. However, we can at least try to make the world a little bit better despite the difficulties that may arise. The question is, what are the right actions? Unfortunately for this question, I have no answers. Anger, or shall I say avoiding anger, is a recurring theme in the discourses. First, anger is fundamentally irrational, as it's nearly impossible to use logic while you're angry. That's why when anger takes over, people quickly lose their composure, inevitably leading to hurtful words. The same applies to outlaws. We shouldn't be angry with them, because they're mistaken about good and evil. Let's say a thief has robbed you. How can you not be mad as a thief? Again, it all comes down to our judgments and what is in our control. It is not in our control to undo the robbery, but it is in our control to stay calm despite unpleasant circumstances. What I'm trying to say is that a report to the police is enough, for rage only harms those who are angry. Most of all, it will not return the lost thing. The news is about nothing which is within the power of your will. Unquote. I understand this as concentrating solely on what's in our power. That way we can endure whatever happens outside of our will. From my perspective, this is something close to happiness. Speaking of happiness, a person is happy if they don't wish for things outside their control, material or otherwise, manage their possessions virtuously, and aren't concerned with anything outside their power. Additionally, Epictetus advises to not grow too fond of material things, since they can be easily taken away, broken, lost, or have any number of things happen to them. If a person understands that everything external is not in their power, they are hindered by nothing, compelled by nothing, hurt by nothing, and are therefore happy. Besides, a true Stoic is eager to face hardships because it is a way toward self-improvement. Challenges give the Stoics the opportunity to prove that they not only believe in philosophy, but actually live by it. Epictetus put it quite bluntly, quote, "If a man is unhappy, remember that his unhappiness is his own fault." Unquote. He goes on admonishing those who took pleasure in conversation and travel and who now weep because they've lost the source of their joy. In fact, he does it in a tough language, stating that those dissatisfied deserve to be more wretched. Moving on, there is one interesting detail in this chapter titled that we ought not to be moved by desire for those things which are not in our power. First, Epictetus talks about the gods, and then, after one page, he mentions God and Zeus. He can't seem to decide in what to believe. There is a group of people whom Epictetus addresses as the ignorant and compares them with children. They cannot be persuaded to change their minds and don't listen to reason. So, when dealing with such individuals, we need to clap hands with them, he says, and be silent, since we can neither explain them something nor engage in a meaningful discussion with them. We should also understand that the ignorant act according to what they think is right, which is why we should excuse them, since they've just followed their own convictions. To illustrate, Epictetus tells us about Socrates, who had sent away women and was talking to his friends when a jailer started weeping. As you might imagine, Socrates excused the jailer. He treats the jailer as a child. Unquote. Then Epictetus reminds us that there will always be superiors and inferiors, and that the superior would certainly overpower the inferior. Think of it, it's not necessarily about money, it's just some people are stronger, some weaker. Those are inborn qualities, so they are independent of the will and therefore are nothing to be worried about. In fact, having read a handful of Stoicism books, I have memorized the phrase, "If it is something you cannot control, then it's none of your concern." From my experience, sometimes it's really helpful to bring back to mind these words, especially in stressful situations, as we humans tend to fret over things outside our reach, whether it's a flight cancellation or other people's emotions. It is called the dichotomy of control, which is a core principle in Stoic philosophy. We can control our thoughts, behaviors, reactions, but not their outcomes, let alone the outcome of other people's decisions. I know this may sound repetitive, but it's really important in Stoicism. Epictetus often tells us to remember what is our own and what belongs to others, so that we aren't be disturbed by things like expensive clothes or fancy cars. The same is true for knowledge. Learn from those who have had more practice and education than you. What's the point of being vexed if others have an advantage over you? Plants must mature before they produce a harvest. Similarly, humans must learn, practice, and contemplate to reach their full potential. Back to the topic, Epictetus teaches to value what you possess, but not to the point that you can't part with it. Quote, "Do not desire many things, and you will have what you want." Unquote. I've noticed that when I watch videos, let's say about beauty products, I start wanting to buy more and more of them on a subconscious level. I don't even realize my desire has heightened until I'm holding a bunch of packages in my hands. In comparison, when I don't pay close attention to what other people have, I'm pretty content with my own belongings. I understand that I don't need more, and it actually amuses me to see all the new items being released. I suppose that's what Epictetus meant, avoiding jealousy, mm, being prepared in case of losses, and having satisfied desire. In fact, I think this way you will not be in awe of the rich. Epictetus maintains that flattering the rich with praise spoils a good citizen and a friend. The philosopher, he says, is a doctor, and those who visit are his patients, with one exception: he cures souls rather than illnesses. Consequently, if the philosopher is a physician, he mustn't call his students. Instead, they must come of their own accord, eager to learn. However, learning alone is by no means enough. Practice is vital. This is precisely what differentiates philosophy from other academic pursuits. Yes, it teaches us how to live a happy and worthy life, but to achieve this, one must train the mind in the right way of thinking. I've learned how to do this from the book How to Be a Stoic by Massimo Pigliucci, where the author provides 12 practical exercises for everyday life. The thing is, you focus on a single exercise for one day before moving on to the next. Personally, I've got into the habit of reading the exercise a couple of times in the morning and then in the evening when I'm at home. By the way, for the sake of convenience, I've written them down and created a set of flashcards, which are always close at hand. I have 30 cards so far, and I'm looking forward to making more, since it is a swift method for absorbing philosophical teachings and applying them to my life later on. So philosophy is not just a collection of inapplicable theories, but a lifestyle. If you want to give it a try, search for a Stoic Week. It is a website with basic exercises and information. I will leave the links of all books and this website below. In my opinion, there are lots of moral lessons in the media, but when it comes to the real world, few people actually behave that way. So Epictetus points out that words carry real power when they stem from true opinions. In other words, if a fool believes in his own nonsense, he is more powerful than someone who talks sense without conviction. Groundless exhortations are miserable virtue. There's a whole chapter dedicated to cynicism in this book. In fact, Stoic philosophy originated in cynicism, but the schools have distinct differences. For example, Stoics allowed wealth and health if they are employed virtuously. Cynics, however, denied all pleasure. They sleep on the ground, have no wife, no children, no praetorium, but only the earth and heavens, and one poor cloak. In addition, cynics challenge societal norms, thinking that they're corrupt, while Stoics engage in solving societal issues through the use of virtue. To wrap up, Stoicism encourages living with accordance to nature, exercising logic and reason, concentrating on what you can control, and being virtuous. Cynicism, on the other hand, is far more radical and almost demands poverty if one wants to become a cynic. Despite all mentioned above, the two branches of philosophy have some similarities. Take material things. Both place very little importance on them, focusing on the capacity of the mind. The most prominent Stoics are Epictetus, Seneca, and the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. One of the most popular cynics is Diogenes of Sinope. This is a man who lived in a tub and asked Alexander the Great to step out of his sunlight. If you're curious, cynics didn't have children for one simple reason: a child wouldn't survive living like them. Epictetus comments that it would be better to expose the children as soon as they are born than to kill them in this way. Lastly, I want to read an excerpt about how Epictetus saw cynics. The cynic is the father of all men. The men are his sons, the women are his daughters. He so carefully visits all, so well does he care for all. Do you think that it is from idle impertinence that he rebukes those whom he meets? He does it as a father, as a brother, and as the minister of the Father of all, the minister of Zeus. Generally, I agree with what Epictetus taught, but there was a chapter that left me taken aback. It is named to those who are desirous of passing life in tranquility, and it begins with: remember that not only the desire of power and of riches makes us mean and subject to others, but even the desire of tranquility and of leisure and of traveling abroad and of learning. Before that, I was convinced that the Stoics fully approved of learning, so this sentence came as quite a surprise to me. If the first few sentences were surprising, this one got me open-mouthed. It says, For if you only direct your purpose to being amused or learning something, you're a silly fellow and incapable of enduring labor. I thought, wait, did you just tell me that I'm stupid because of reading this? If I wanted to learn something from this book, am I a fool? So I was beginning to feel miserable until another sentence appeared. But if reading does not secure for you a happy and tranquil life, what is the use of it? Here it struck me that I should read in order to live happily and not the other way around. I've heard a lot of people say that they read in order to escape this world. Perhaps Epictetus was implying that we should avoid this type of reading, reading for mere pleasure. Next, he goes on to say that we shouldn't be vexed if we are deprived of books, which corresponds to the Stoic belief regarding the indifference of material things. He adds that books are to remind us of our duty, to push us toward action, and reading or writing for the purpose of appearing smart is futile. In essence, his stance is that the reading of books is a preparation for life. I partly agree with his viewpoint, but I would argue that books also possess artistic value. A well-written book should be able to teach something even though it's fun to read. Maybe Epictetus meant philosophical books, but I'm not sure about it. They didn't have a lot of works of fiction at that time anyway. That's all what I've prepared for today. I couldn't talk for hours about the discourses, but I don't think you want to listen to my rambling for that long. I hope I've managed to create a proper impression about this book without overinterpreting its meaning, and I must also note that the book includes Marcus Aurelius's expectations after Epictetus's discourses, though I left it out of my review. And I have one task for you. Count how many times the red light behind me has turned off during this video. I would really appreciate if you share your opinion in the comment section below and support me with like and subscription. Until next time.